When you speak, your voice is your most important tool. Fortunately, you can learn to use your voice like playing a musical instrument to increase your power and persuasiveness in any conversation or speech that you give. All successful people are excellent communicators. In fact, the work at Harvard University on multiple intelligences concluded that social intelligence, the ability to interact well with others, is the highest paid and most respected intelligence in our society. So how do you communicate more effectively with others?
Now, the first one is a profound communication principle that comes from the book, The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. And if you haven't read that book, I highly recommend it. And the first agreement he teaches in the book is be impeccable with your word. And what that means is to speak with integrity, which means to say what you mean and mean what you say. Now, as I just mentioned, words have the power to create or destroy, and a careless comment can alter a relationship forever. So it's a good idea to choose your words carefully and consider their impact before you put them out there in the world. So before you speak or write, I want you to ask yourself these 4 questions. Is it necessary? Is it true? Is it kind? And is it helpful? And if you don't get yeses to those questions, then don't say it. You know, when you say frivolous, untrue, mean, or unhelpful things, it doesn't create a sense of trust or connection in the other person you're communicating with. And by the way, the same guideline also goes for the words you say to yourself.
One of the things I observe is simply this. A lot of people are very careless with their language. I mean, the words you use either lift up your energy, the words you use either make you more creative, or the words you use deny your talents. The words you use could reduce your energy. I mean, words have destroyed nations. I mean, think about the great dictators. Their words of hatred, their words of toxicity, their words of breakdown caused the people around them to do sometimes incredibly terrifying acts. And then you look at people like a Nelson Mandela or a Martin Luther King Jr. or a Mother Teresa. You look at the great business builders. You look at humanitarians. You look at a lot of the great artists, and they were so careful with their words. And their words lifted people up. And that's really what great leaders do. They use the language of leadership. You look at a victim, and they say things like, this is a problem. I've got a problem right here. Or I'm really scared about this. Or I hate that client. Or I hate this work. Or I'm sick of this day. Or I'm exhausted. Or I don't like that. Or she never likes me. It's literally the language of toxicity. And the words you use really are like a context or a framework or a stained glass window on the way you see the world. I mean, here's a game-changing insight. You see the world not as it is, you see the world as you are. You see the world through a lens, and your language forms that lens of belief. And I see this everywhere. Someone very close to me who was a little sloppy with her languaging said, oh, I forgot to do this. It's not on my to-do list. I should punch myself in the face. If you say that every day, what's that doing to your self-esteem? If you say that over a lifetime, what's that doing to your self-identity? And as you know, your income is a function of your self-identity. And your performance is a reflection of your personal story. And the way you build your self-architecture and the way you see yourself in the world is in part through your words. You're never going to rise any higher in terms of your impact in the world than the way you see yourself. If you see yourself as average, well, you're not going to read the books, go to the events, do the study, put in the training time, find the mentors, do the work to rise to world class, because you're running an interior psychological story that says you're average and the A players are somehow different from you. If deep down inside you're coming from scarcity and you think, you know what, I'll never have more than the salary that I'm making because of the story that you have through the words you've used, well, then you're not going to go out there and ask for the big order. You're not going to go start the big business. You're not going to read the books on financial mastery because deep inside you would say, what would be the point? I'm not one of those people. And if you want to rewire your self-identity, So you go out in the world and you're literally operating at legendary, then you absolutely must dial into this first point of what legendary leaders do in terms of the way they speak, which is get your precision of languaging right. Because like I say, the great leaders, how did they transform humanity? It was through their words. How did the great military generals get their armies to go out there on fire? It was through their words. So calibrate your languaging so your words to yourself are world class. And also the words you use to your team, to your customers, to your loved ones. So incredibly important. If you look at the 95% card-carrying members of the cult of mediocrity, they're so sloppy with their languaging. Don't be silly. I hate that customer. This job is going to make me sick. And they repeat it over and over, and then they wonder why they have an illness 10 or 15 years down the road.
And this leads me to the next communication skill that's probably the most critical skill for everyone on the planet to master. And that is the skill of effective listening. Now, the undeniable truth is that so many of us are terrible listeners. We pretend we're listening, but we're really just thinking about what we're going to say next. We're rehearsing. We're so worried about getting our point across that we pay very little attention to what the other person is trying to say. And there can never be effective communication without both parties being as focused on the listening part as they are on the speaking part. Because if you aren't really listening and responding to what the other person is actually saying, ultimately all you're really doing is having a conversation with yourself. Now, here's an invaluable tip. Whenever you're having an important conversation, could be with your spouse or your partner, with a child, with an employer, a customer, or someone on the other side of the political divide, let them go first. Don't interrupt them and argue with them. Let them empty themselves out first. Remember this, you can't pour water into a full glass. You have to let the water out before you can have more put in. Instead, really listen to their point of view. Be curious. How is it that they've come to feel this way, to have this point of view? What is it that they are needing you to hear? Now, this takes a commitment to really want to know what the other person is experiencing and needing. And I can tell you from my experiences having worked with couples, corporate teams, and diverse community groups, it takes time for people to really feel they've been heard. But if you invest the time and the intention to do that, they will then be ready to hear you and what you're experiencing, what you're needing, and what you're wanting. And by the way, a really great technique you can use to facilitate and practice this kind of listening is a technique we call a heart talk. Now, in a heart talk, whether it's between two people, like a husband and wife, or a group of people sitting in a circle at a staff meeting, the person who is speaking holds a physical object like a ball or a stuffed animal or a water bottle and talks for as long as they need to about the topic at hand without anyone interrupting them, disagreeing with them, or stealing the focus until that person is totally complete with whatever they want to say. And then the person passes the object to the other person or to the next person in the group. Now let me say one more thing about when in doubt, check it out. Sometimes when you've done your best to listen closely to someone, you may not have heard exactly what it was they were trying to say. And that's why it's so important for you to double check and make sure you've really understood them correctly. And the easiest way to do that is before you speak to say, so what I'm hearing you say is, and then repeat back to them what you think they were saying, what they meant to say. And then give them the opportunity to clarify any misunderstandings that you might have before you respond to them. So it's always best to make sure you're really responding to what they're really saying instead of what you think they're saying.
Number 3, speak your truth even when your voice shakes. The conversation you are most resisting is the conversation you most need to have. What do I mean by that? Well, all too often, we get hurt by someone or we get upset by someone. It could be a work colleague, it could be at home in our family life. And we are almost taught by society not to speak up. We are afraid, of being laughed at. People could think we're weird. We could fail. And a lot of us, we think, well, we could lose the relationship and end up alone. It's fear. And so what it is, it's almost like non-communication born of fear. But the most effective human beings on the planet all have one thing in common. And they speak up and they share their truth. And the more you practice, again, the quality of your performance is all about the quality of your practice. And the more you actually practice speaking up when you know you want to speak up, the more you will actually step into your next level of power. And the more you actually betray yourself by not speaking up when maybe someone in a restaurant is serving you and they're not being polite, or maybe a client is being disrespectful, or maybe someone on the street is doing something that is dishonoring your humanity. Every single time you swallow what you most need to say, you actually lose power. You actually become more and more impotent as a human being. I mean, because you know this, we give away our power to the things that we avoid. The hard talks, when you actually speak up, are when you grow in power. And you actually not only grow in power, you build intimacy in the relationship. I mean, just think about it. When you actually speak up with someone and you tell them how you're feeling and you tell them what's most important to you, well, if it's the right relationship, one that's meant to be in your life, whether it's professional or personal, that is really a gateway into the other person having the permission to open up as well. And then you have two mature people talking about what's really most important versus sidestepping the truth. Remember this incredibly important brain tattoo. You can say whatever you want so long as you say it with respect. I mean, if someone has been rude to you in a coffee shop, if your friend is late for dinner and it's important to you that they're on time, well, if you lash out at them and say, "Why were you late? I'm angry," that's going to put them into attack mode, which is going to cause them to be defensive. But if you say to them, Johnny or Ravi, whatever their name is, if you say, "You know what, thank you so much for joining me for dinner. Before we get started and enjoy this incredible meal, if I may, I'd just like to share something with deep respect. Punctuality is so important to me, and I've been waiting here for half an hour, and your time is valuable, and my time is valuable. And I'd be ever so grateful if when we get together, you would respect my time just like I want to respect your time." You've said it with respect. Look how powerful that is. And if it is a healthy person versus a toxic person, they're going to appreciate you being so truthful. And you're also going to teach them the punctuality matters. So the second tactic is you can say whatever you want to a teammate, to an employee, to a customer, to a family member, so long as you say it with love and respect. Number 4.
If you want to make yourself articulate, then not only should you read, but you should write down what you think.
And one of the things that just blows me away about universities is that no one ever tells students why they should write something. It's like, well, you have to do this assignment. Well, why are you writing? Well, you need the grade. It's like, no, you need to learn to think. Because thinking makes you act effectively in the world. Thinking makes you win the battles you undertake. And those could be battles for good things. If you can think and speak and write, you are absolutely deadly. Nothing can get in your way. So that's why you learn to write. It's like, and I can't believe that people aren't just told that. It's like, it's the most powerful weapon you can possibly provide someone with. And I know lots of people who've been staggeringly successful and watched them throughout my life. I mean, those people, you don't want to have an argument with them. They'll just slash you into pieces. And not in a malevolent way. It's like, if you're going to make your point and they're going to make their point, you better have your points organized, because otherwise you are going to look like and be an absolute idiot. You are not going to get anywhere. Teach people to be articulate, because that's the most dangerous thing you can possibly be.
If you're going to speak effectively, you have to know way more than you're talking about. To do that, you have to do a lot of reading. That's on the input side. And then on the output side, well, there's some techniques, let's say, is like if you're speaking in front of a group, you are not delivering a talk to a group. That's not what you're doing. The talk isn't a packaged thing that you present to a group. There isn't a group. There's a bunch of individuals, and you talk to them. So when I talk to a group, I always talk to people one at a time. And that makes it easier too, because you know how to talk to a person. It's like, can you talk to 1,000 people? Well, probably not, because it's too intimidating. But there isn't 1,000 people there. There's 1,000 individuals. And so you just look at an individual and you say something, and you can tell if they're engaged. They look confused, or they look interested, or they look angry, or they look bored, and they give you feedback about how you're doing. And so one thing is to have something to say, yeah, but the next thing is pay attention to who you're talking to. And so you don't deliver a talk to an audience. That's a really bad way of thinking about it. You're actually engaged in a conversation with an audience. Even if they're not talking, they're nodding and shifting position and, looking like this, and you can pull all that in and use it to govern the level at which you're addressing the entire audience. So the last thing I would say is, well, having the aim to be a good communicator is a good start. There isn't anything that you can possibly do that makes you more competent in everything you do than to learn how to communicate. I don't care if you're going to be a carpenter. I mean, being a carpenter, by the way, is very difficult, especially if you're a good carpenter. But if you're good at communicating as a carpenter, you're like 10 times better as a carpenter. The people that I've watched in my life who've been spectacularly successful they have skills. Clearly, that's a minimum precondition. But they're also very, very good at articulating themselves. And so whenever they negotiate, they're successful. Well, that's kind of like the definition of success in life, right? You negotiate and you're successful. It doesn't mean you win. Because if you're a good negotiator, if you're a really good negotiator, everybody walks away from the negotiation thrilled. And so then people line up to do things with you. So, and that's all dependent on your ability to communicate. So, practice.
Number 5 key to communication is there are 4 basic personality styles. The first is who we call relators. The relator is very high on people orientation and indirect. They are quiet, self-contained, not particularly expressive. They're sensitive, people-oriented, and concerned about other people's opinions. If you're communicating, this person requires slow, low-key, easygoing, friendly, almost warm and fuzzy. So if you're dealing with relators, you have to go slow and you have to be patient. You can't be pushy because they like time to make decisions and they need time to talk to other people. Their greatest concern in life is, let's get along, let's all be friends. Relators tend to gravitate toward fields where relators are most effective. So you find relators in fields like nursing, social services, counselors, where they relate to other people. Now the next type of person is the analyzer. Now the analyzer is indirect and self-contained, but very task-oriented. This is the kind of person who's not so much concerned about people, but more concerned about doing the job and are more inward-directed. This type of person at the extreme can be an uncommunicative bureaucrat, very meticulous and picky about every detail. Their primary concern is, let's be accurate. They only feel comfortable when the numbers and the details are correct. Now, where do you think they'll gravitate to in terms of work? Well, they'll gravitate toward accounting, computers, engineering, bookkeeping, computer programming. When you're dealing with an analyzer, concentrate on giving them lots of detail because this is what makes them comfortable with a decision. Now, the third type of person is what we call the director. The director, these people are bottom line oriented, impatient. They make quick decisions and they don't need a lot of detail. They're most concerned with let's get results, get to the bottom line, cut to the chase. The fourth type of personality is what we call the socializer. And sometimes they're called expressive. They like to express themselves a lot. The socializer is outgoing, direct, voluble, and very people-oriented. This person's primary motivation is achievement, and achievement with and through other people. They like to talk about achievement. What are you doing? How did you do it? How did it work? Let me tell you what I did and how it worked for me. Many times they become managers or executives because they have highly integrated personalities. They're very concerned about results, but they're also concerned about people. Now, everybody you meet is in one of these 4 quadrants or groups. The mistake that most people make is that they treat everyone else as if they were just the same as they were. However, no matter which style of communicator you are, 3/4 of the people you meet are something else. Now, there's no right or wrong, better or worse style. These are almost born into people. You can see them in children from an early age. However, your job in asking questions and listening to people is to find out which style they are and then to practice personality flexibility so that you can get along with a greater number of different types of people.
People who are going to be really successful in the future are willing to make sacrifices in the present in order to guarantee that future. And by sacrifices, we mean they're willing to put in the long hours. They're willing to get up earlier. They're willing to work harder. They're willing to stay later. They're willing to invest and save their money, even though they don't have a lot, knowing that with compound interest, it will grow and grow over time. They're willing to spend an enormous amount of time investing in their children, knowing that this investment in their children in time and love and affection and support will pay off for decades and generations, even into the lives of their children and grandchildren. So sacrifice is the critical word, and sacrifice means that you have the ability to discipline yourself. You have the ability to delay gratification in the short term so that you can enjoy far greater rewards in the long term. And the wonderful thing is when you practice self-discipline, especially in exercise, for example, but even in hard work, your brain releases endorphins. And endorphins are called nature's happy drug. And it actually makes you happy to practice self-discipline, to take control of yourself and make yourself do the right thing and complete it. You feel good about yourself in the moment. And of course, the effect that it has on your future can be tremendous. Now, some years ago, a businessman named Herbert Gray did a long time study, it was kind of his project, to find out what he called the common denominator of success. He said the common denominator of success was quite simple. He said, successful people, he found, make a habit of doing what unsuccessful people don't like to do. And of course, the logical question is, well, what is it that unsuccessful people don't like to do? Well, it turned out to be the same thing that successful people don't like to do either, but they do it anyway because they recognize that that's the price of success. A simple thing like exercising, going for a run or a walk at the end of the day. Well, do people like to do this? Do we look forward to exertion and perspiration and sweating and straining and everything else? No, we don't look forward to it, but we do it because we recognize that this is the price of looking and feeling fit, trim, living a long life, taking good care of our bodies, and so on. So remember, the same things that unsuccessful people don't like to do are things you don't like to do either. And again, it comes back to our favorite word, sacrifice. Being willing to pay the price in the present to enjoy the great rewards in the future.
So the master key to riches is self-discipline. What are the 7 personal qualities that assure success? Number 1, you must know yourself and know exactly what it is you want in life. Goal orientation is an essential requirement of all successful people. And as we'll talk about later, we know lack of goal orientation goes hand in hand with failure in every single walk of life. Somebody should be able to wake you up at 3 o'clock in the morning and ask you, what is your major definite purpose in life? What is your number 1 goal? What do you want to accomplish more than anything else in the next 3 to 5 years? And you should be able to wake up out of a sound sleep and tell that person instantly. You must know it crystal clear. We know that our goals always determine the direction that we go in life. I was reading something by Thoreau last night. It says that you should go confidently in the direction of your dreams. It says that try to live the life that you have imagined for yourself, and you will be astonished at how far and how fast you actually go in life if you always try to live consistent with your dreams about yourself for the future. And Conrad Hilton said that you've got to have a dream if you want to make a dream come true. Most self-made millionaires compare themselves to billionaires. Most people starting their businesses compare themselves to millionaires. But once they get to be millionaire status, they start to compare themselves to billionaires, and they think, geez, look how poorly I'm doing in comparison to the billionaires. But in every case, it's the vision that is the activating force. The greater, the more compelling, the more burning that vision, that idea of where you want to go and what you want to do. We find that companies that achieve great things always have somebody in the company who has a mission, who wants to do something really important. I was talking to a gentleman at the university not long ago who spent 25 years, from the time he entered biochemistry in his late teens, he spent 25 years, and his whole dream in life was to make a major contribution to DNA research, the basic molecule of all of human life. That's all he wanted to do. And for 25 years, he had that as a vision and as a mission. And in the 25th year, he made a major breakthrough, which has now put him in line for a Nobel Prize. And he'll probably go down in history as one of the great biochemists of this century. And this is what kept a person going for 25 years, was the mission. The ability to focus. Very important. The ability to focus, as we've said and we'll say over again, is the absolute critical requirement for success. People say, geez, I don't know if I can be as successful as other people are because they have more advantages and more benefits and more intelligence and so on. Don't you believe it? A person who is focused, of average intelligence, can run circles around a person who is a genius who doesn't have the focus. That is why people come out of the universities with PhD degrees and with master's degrees and with sometimes 5, 10, 15 years of advanced education, and they can barely make a living, and other people quit school in grade 10 and grade 11, and they come out of school and 5 or 10 years later they have their own successful businesses. It's not the basic talents, although talents are important and education is important. It's the ability to focus the talents that you have like an arrow, if you like a sniper, to be able to hit specific targets. And that's why you don't have to think of yourself in terms of limitations. Many of us hesitate about going ahead in business because we think that somehow we lack the talents and abilities. We look at other people who are successful in their businesses and we think those people must have unique capabilities. It's only when you get to know these people and meet these people that you begin to realize that they're no different from you or I. The only difference between a successful business person, or let us say a person who has launched a business and one who has not, is what? Is the person who's launched the business has done it. The person who has not has not. And I've seen this by studying, if you like, hundreds if not thousands of entrepreneurs. All right, the next personal quality that assures success is you must determine the price that you will have to pay in order to be successful, and then resolve to pay that price. For every single thing you want in life, there's a price. And there's a price that has to be paid, and nature always demands that the price be paid in advance. And the price is invariably hard work. There is no substitute for hard work. Many people say, well, geez, look at that person, they got the nice house and the nice car. You never realize that behind the scenes, that person was probably working 16, 18 hours a day, probably for 5 years before they got their break and 5 years after they got their break. All you see in the end result is the nice house and the nice car. The reason I mention this is sometimes people start a business, they think, well, sure, I'll have to work a couple of extra hours a day. And as somebody once told me, when you start your own business, you only have to work half the time. You only have to work half days from then on. And you can decide which 12 hours it's going to be. In a recent study, they found that in our society, you work 8 hours a day for survival. And everything over that, you work for success. If you're only working 8 hours a day, you won't do anything more than survive. Every additional hour, whether you're working for yourself or someone else, is for success. And so it's very important that you keep putting in those additional hours, whether it's extra reading, extra study, extra work. Number 3 characteristic is self-responsibility. You have to accept 100% responsibility for your life and for everything that you are or ever will be. Our great old saying, if it's to be, it's up to me. Very important. And the opposite of accepting full responsibility is making excuses. And many people have said that making excuses is a disease that is fatal to success.
In the military academies, I think it's worldwide, it's the same. But in the military academies, whenever you are confronted with a senior officer and you have, let us say you have your tie is askew or your jacket is not ironed, they'll say, "Cadet, why is your jacket unironed?" And you're only allowed to give one of 3 answers. Yes, sir, no excuse. You are not allowed to say any other words to a senior officer except, yes, sir, I will do it. No, sir, I didn't do it. And no excuses, sir. And that's how they train the top officers in the world, is yes, sir, no excuses. Because they know that nothing makes a person weaker or littler than always making excuses. You just sound awful. You just sound incompetent. No leader could be a leader if all they did was make excuses. There is a turning point in your life where you become an adult or you remain a child. And it's like a line that you cross. You come up to this line, and on one side of the line, other side of the line is responsibility, where you are now responsible for the rest of your life. On this side of the line is blaming others for your problems. Blaming is the major source of negative emotions and unhappiness and stress and failure. Accepting responsibility is the major reason for happiness, personal power, and success. When you step across the line, you say, from now on, I accept complete responsibility for my life and for everything that happens to me. If you have a goal, you accept responsibility for achieving the goal. If you have a problem, you accept responsibility for solving the problem. But whatever happens, you don't blame other people. Blaming makes you weak and angry. It makes you feel inferior and insecure. Henry Ford once gave this motto for success, and I use it all the time. I love it. It's never complain, never explain.
Number 5, you must be willing to work hard, to go the extra mile, and to always do more than you're paid for. One of the major secrets of success is always do more than you're paid for, and then you will always be paid more than what you're getting now. And number 6, you must use your time well, every minute, every hour, every day. Remember, this life is not a rehearsal for anything else in life. This is the real thing. And all successful business people, all self-made millionaires, look upon their time as a resource, and they're very careful with it. They spend their time the way they would spend money.
Time equals money. Time equals money. If a person asks you for a certain amount of time, or if an activity takes a certain amount of time, ask yourself, how much money would you be willing to exchange for the successful completion of that activity? If you want to earn a certain amount of money, ask yourself, how much of your time are you willing to spend? How much of your money are you willing to contribute? Successful people always look at time and money, and they realize that the two are interchangeable. Now here's another important point. You can invest time to get more money. You can invest money to get more time. And time and money put together equal happiness. Happiness, or life, we can call it life, but basically happiness is a better word. So always exchange time for happiness. Always exchange money for happiness. Always realize that they're interchangeable and that you can either invest them or you can spend them. If you invest them, you'll have a return. If you spend them, then they're gone forever.
And finally, number 7,
the most important single thing that happens in life is the ability to spot trends and to be aware of changes and where the changes are going. In a recent Fortune magazine article on why companies fail, they said one of the major reasons for failure is the failure to anticipate how changes are going to affect their business and to go on doing things the same way.
And what we have found, the series of articles in Inc. magazine, they were interviewing people who'd become fabulously successful, rags to riches stories. Every one of them said the only reason I succeeded is because I developed the habit of always looking for the opportunity.
It's really quite astonishing. I remember reading a story of a serial entrepreneur, and he'd made many millions of dollars in different businesses. And one day he was reading the Wall Street Journal, and it said imports of Italian racing bicycles increased 37% in the last 12 months. And that's what it was, just a little thing from one of the Department of Trade publications. So he said, 37% growth rate, that's pretty good. He said, I wonder why that is. So he started to do some research. And what he found was, this is many years ago, is Italian racing bicycles, which is very popular today, were almost unknown in the U.S. He got in touch with the major Italian bicycle manufacturers. He opened a store. He imported the bicycles. He advertised, and they started to sell. By the time he was finished, he had 32 stores selling Italian bicycles by the shipload, and he made something like $15–20 million before he sold the business. It all came from just noticing that little notice. But the thing is, he was looking for the notice. He was looking for ideas. So keep your mind open. So there are 2 obstacles to becoming everything you are capable of becoming. Obstacle number 1 is homeostasis. It means that you become rigid and fixed in the way that you think. Homeostasis is another rephrasing of the comfort zone. It's a major reason that people don't grow is because they get locked into what they've already done in the past, and they're very uneasy about doing something new. And you're not willing to try new things. And so be alert to these. The natural tendency to slip into a comfort zone and fight to stay there, and the natural tendency to resist new ideas. In order to get yourself out of the comfort zone, they found that if I like to use an example like this. When Warren Bennis did his study called Leaders, which was one of the best-selling book on leadership of the 90s, they'd studied 93 leaders, and they studied them for 5 years to find out what qualities they had that made them different. And they were completely different industries, and they found there were 5. And one of them was they refused to get stuck in a comfort zone. And so what they did is they would get into a comfort zone. We say the only difference between a comfort zone and a rut is the depth. No, between a rut and a grave is the depth. And where they would get into this comfort zone very quickly, and the only way they could get out is by using a grappling hook, if you like, and throwing a grappling hook up to pull themselves out of the comfort zone, and it was always a big goal. And so what you do is by creating a big goal, you're forced out of your comfort zone because you cannot stay at your current level of performance and set a big goal for yourself. The goal forces you to think bigger, which is why we talked about putting a 0 at the end of your income goal. It forces you. There's no way that you can achieve that doing what you're now doing. You're going to have to do something different, and you're going to have to do it in a different place in a different way.
Learn to see the opportunity that's right around you. It's easy to get busy and sort of blinded and just walk along and not see what's possible and what's available.
Now here's the interesting thing. I was listening to somebody who grew up in a small town, and he was talking about this interesting point. He said he came from a poor family, and there were 3 families in that town that owned everything. They owned the mill, and they owned the factory, and they owned the general store, and they owned the shipping, and they owned the trucking, and they owned the agricultural processing. They owned everything. And these 3 families were rich. They had beautiful homes. Everybody revered them and talked about them, and they were on the bank boards and everything else. And he went to school with the kids from these 3 families, and everybody wanted to be their friends. Of course, you remember those days. And he found that they were quite normal kids. They weren't very different from anybody else. But somehow these families owned everything. And it was a real shock to him. It wasn't their education, because they weren't getting a better education than he was. There weren't the grades, because the grades were the same. It certainly wasn't their physical attractiveness or anything else. It was just one thing. They had an attitude of looking for opportunities and possibilities.
It takes imagination, creative imagination, to know that diamonds don't look like diamonds in their rough state, nor does a pile of iron ore look like iron or steel. Great opportunities lurk constantly in every aspect of the work in which we now find ourselves. In the year 1843, a man was born who, during his lifetime, was to have a profound effect on millions of people. His name was Russell Herman Conwell. Well, one day a group of boys came to Dr. Conwell at his church and asked him if he would be willing to instruct them in college courses. They wanted a college education but lacked the money to pay for it. He told them that he'd do all he could, and as the boys left, a thought, an idea began to form in Dr. Conwell's mind. He asked himself, why couldn't there be a fine college for poor but deserving young men? Well, here was a great idea, and he went to work on it at once. Almost single-handedly, Dr. Conwell raised $7 million with which he founded one of the world's leading universities. And he raised the money by giving more than 6,000 lectures all over the country, and in each one of them, he told the story called Acres of Diamonds. The story was the account of an African farmer who heard tales about other settlers who had made millions by discovering diamond mines. And these tales so excited the farmer that he could hardly wait to sell his farm and search for diamonds himself. So he sold his farm and spent the rest of his life wandering the vast African continent, searching unsuccessfully for the gleaming gems which brought such high prices on the markets of the world. Finally, in a fit of despondency, broke and desperate, as I remember the story, he threw himself into a river and drowned. Now, meanwhile, the man who had bought his farm one day found a large and unusual stone in a stream which cut through the property. And the stone turned out to be a great diamond of enormous value. And he then discovered that the farm was covered with them, and it was to become one of the world's richest diamond mines. The first farmer had owned literally acres of diamonds, but had sold them for practically nothing in order to look for them elsewhere. If he'd only taken the time to study and prepare himself, to learn what diamonds looked like in their rough state, and had first thoroughly explored the land he owned, he would have found the millions he sought right on his own property. The thing about this story that so profoundly affected Dr. Conwell and subsequently millions of others was the idea that each of us is, at this moment, standing in the middle of his own acres of diamonds. If we will only have the wisdom and patience to intelligently and effectively explore the work in which we're now engaged, we'll usually find that it contains the riches we seek, whether they be financial or intangible or both.
If you can tell me what you want, I can tell you how to get it. The problem with the great majority of individuals is not with their ability to achieve their goals in life, but rather with the failure to understand two factors vital to successful living. The first is to make the decision as to what it is we want enough to give it most of our attention until it's been achieved, and to clearly define it. And the second is to fully understand that we have the ability to achieve this goal, or we wouldn't want it in the first place. The next vital rule to successful living is to understand we can achieve nothing without paying the price. Now, what is that price? Well, it's many things. First, it's understanding emotionally, as well as intellectually, that we literally become what we think about, that we must control our thoughts if we're to control our lives. It's understanding fully that, as ye sow, so shall ye reap.
My old friend Dr. Norman Vincent Peale put it this way: this is one of the greatest laws in the universe. Fervently do I wish I had discovered it as a very young man. It dawned upon me much later in life, and I found it to be one of the greatest, if not my greatest discovery outside of my relationship to God. The great law, briefly and simply stated, is that if you think in negative terms, you will get negative results. If you think in positive terms, you will achieve positive results. That is the simple fact, he went on to say, which is at the basis of an astonishing law of prosperity and success. In 3 words, believe and succeed. George Bernard Shaw said, people are always blaming their circumstances for what they are. I don't believe in circumstances. The people who get on in this world are the people who get up and look for the circumstances they want, and if they can't find them, make them. Well, it's pretty apparent, isn't it? And every person who discovered this for a while believed that he was the first one to work it out. We become what we think about. Now, it stands to reason that a person who's thinking about a concrete and worthwhile goal is going to reach it, because that's what he's thinking about, and we become what we think about. Conversely, the man who has no goal, who doesn't know where he's going, and whose thoughts must therefore be thoughts of confusion and anxiety and fear and worry, becomes what he thinks about. His life becomes one of frustration and fear and anxiety and worry. And if he thinks about nothing, he becomes nothing.
You are at this moment the sum total of your thoughts to this point, for there is nothing else you can be. And 5 years from now, you can be and have anything you set your entire mind and heart upon.
So decide now. What is it you want? Plant your goal in your mind. It's the most important decision you ever make in your entire life. What is it you want? Do you want to be an outstanding salesman? A better worker at your particular job? Do you want to go places in your company? In your community? Do you want to get rich? All you've got to do is plant that seed in your mind, care for it, work steadily toward your goal, and it will become a reality. It not only will, there's no way that it cannot.
Secondly, it's cutting away all the fetters from the mind and permitting it to soar as it was divinely designed to do. It's the realization that your limitations are self-imposed, and that the opportunities for you today are enormous beyond belief. It's rising above narrow-minded pettiness and prejudice. Thirdly, to use all your courage to force yourself to think positively on your own problem, to set a definite and clearly defined goal for yourself, to let your marvelous mind think about your goal from all possible angles, to let your imagination speculate freely upon many different possible solutions, to refuse to believe there are any circumstances sufficiently strong to defeat you in the accomplishment of your purpose, to act promptly and decisively when your course is clear, and to keep constantly aware of the fact that you are, at this moment, standing in the middle of your own acre of diamond.
Have you ever wondered why so many men work so hard and honestly without ever achieving anything in particular, and others don't seem to work hard and yet seem to get everything? They seem to have the magic touch. You've heard them say that about someone. Everything he touches turns to gold. And have you ever noticed that a man who becomes successful tends to continue to become successful? And on the other hand, have you noticed how a man who's a failure tends to continue to fail? Well, it's because of goals. Some of us have goals, some don't. People with goals succeed because they know where they're going. It's that simple. Think of a ship leaving a harbor, and think of it with the complete voyage mapped out and planned. The captain and crew know exactly where it's going and how long it'll take. It has a definite goal. Now, 9,999 times out of 10,000, it will get to where it started out to get. Now, let's take another ship, just like the first, only let's not put a crew on it or a captain at the helm. Let's give it no aiming point, no goal, no destination. We just start the engines and let it go. I think you'll agree with me that if it gets out of the harbor at all, it will either sink or wind up on some deserted beach, a derelict. It can't go anyplace because it has no destination and no guidance, and it's the same with a human being.
I want you to write on a card what it is you want more than anything else. It may be more money. Perhaps you'd like to double your income or make a specific amount of money. It may be a beautiful home. It may be success at your job. It may be a particular position in life. It could be a more harmonious family. You needn't show it to anyone, but carry it with you so that you can look at it several times a day. Think about it in a cheerful, relaxed, positive way each morning when you get up, and immediately you have something to work for, something to get out of bed for, something to live for. As you look at it, remember that you must become what you think about, and since you're thinking about your goal, you realize that soon it will be yours. In fact, it's yours really the moment you write it down and begin to think about it. Don't concern yourself too much with how you're going to achieve your goal. Leave that completely to a power greater than yourself. All you have to do is know where you're going. The answers will come to you of their own accord. I can't emphasize too much the importance of describing your goal in detail. If it's a beautiful new home, get the actual plans, or at least an elevation drawing of the home. If it's a certain amount of money, write down the specific amount for the coming year to the penny, and then work your plan. Whatever your goal may be, write it down in detail. Then you're like the ship. You're on course, and you reach more successful ports in a few years than most men do in a lifetime.
Now, where most people are making a mistake is they set their goals down. They say, well, what is your goals? Write them down. So the fellow sits down, he says, I want a car, I want a house, I want some money, and this is the way they set their goals. Now, folks, if we had a whole group of seeds, let's take apple seeds. We had 50 different types of apple seeds. And we just grabbed any one of them out and said, we want apples. We throw them in the ground, they come up, and they say, gee, those are green apples. I wanted red ones. Well, that's because you just picked any type of an apple seed. You didn't describe it. So we must learn to define. Now, you've heard of the word of visualizing, that you have to learn to visualize things. And when you visualize something, this is the thing you're going to bring in your life if the visualization is strong enough. And we're always visualizing things in our life. But our tendency is to visualize negative situations. Now, the reason for visualizing negative situations is because, folks, let's not kid ourselves, we are living in a negative world. If I ask somebody, I says, by the way, Joe, how do you feel today? He says, good, fine. The next day I ask him how he feels, and he says, I feel terrible. I have had a pain in my stomach, and I have ache all over, and he goes into you'd think he was an actor. He can describe a negative situation in his body so wonderful, but when he feels good, he just says, fine. How come people, when they feel fine, they don't say, I feel great, I feel wonderful, I feel so great that I expect all the wonderful things in the world to happen to me today? In other words, have that little feeling when you talk about the good things in life. I say, how are you doing in business? The guy says, fine. And if he has a bad day, I says, how are you doing? He says, lousy. Oh, let me tell you, we're just having a terrible time. Did you read that article the other day? It took me several hours to find it, but it was on the back page down at the bottom in fine print, but I located it. People like negative things. They seem to vibrate with them for some strange reason. They don't want things that are negative in their life, but they keep insisting on talking about them. And they can paint the most beautiful picture of loss and lack. We are creators. Nothing comes to us. Everything comes from us. And everything that you have in your life is exactly what you designed. The dress you're wearing, the coat you're wearing, the neighbors you got, the friends you got, is that everything we attract is what we are. And what I am speaks so loudly, I cannot hear what you say. And what you are speaks so loudly, I cannot hear what you say. You see, everything that you have is the things that you've created. So be careful about what you create. Be careful. It's hard to visualize a thing. we have to learn to describe things. Now, I'm going to go through a description of a thing because this is very important in your lives, folks. Please listen and please try to remember what I'm saying. You can change your life that quick into everything wonderful. You can have everything wonderful happening to you if you use these basic, simple little things. Now, I'm going to describe a thing that, an automobile. I'll talk about an automobile because an automobile is easy to describe and people can comprehend it very quickly and very easily. I'm going to talk about a Cadillac. And every time I talk about a Cadillac, folks, I'm not describing the Cadillac per se. I'm talking about a Cadillac idea. And I'm not talking about something that you say, well, I got to have money to have a Cadillac. I'm not talking about money. It is not necessary that you have money to have a Cadillac. There's many wonderful things can happen to you where these things can come to you from very unusual sources. Many wonderful things can happen to you. Too many people stop their dreams because they start thinking about the thing that is not necessary in order to have it. I say to somebody, I say, do you want a new Cadillac? The guy says, I want one, but I can't afford it. I says, it has nothing to do with affording it this minute. I just want to know what you really want. Most people are afraid to define what they want in life. They're afraid to define it. They're afraid it's going to cost them something. Now, so I says, Pete, what do you want? He says, a Cadillac. I says, fine, Pete. Now, this is where people make their mistakes. I says, I got a nice 1936 beat-up model downstairs. I'll give it to you. He says, I don't want a 36 model Cadillac. I says, you just told me you wanted a Cadillac. He says, I want a 62 Cadillac. I says, why didn't you tell me, Pete? Why didn't you tell me? This is the way people set their dreams. They just say, I want a Cadillac. You want an orange one or a green one? He says, I want a red one. Now he's starting to define. And you know, it's very difficult to define up here in your mind. The best thing to do is to get a piece of paper, folks, and start defining on a piece of paper. A 1962 Cadillac. A red Cadillac 1962 convertible with a white top. And when he gets all through, the perfect visualization is up here now. Because he has described it. When you write it, you start seeing it. So he gets the picture up here by writing it down here. This is how you define things that you want in this world. So he gets it all defined. When he gets that Cadillac completely defined in his mind, he's got the seed. He hasn't planted it yet. He's got it picked out. Now, the important thing is that you must release that seed. You must release it, and it must be planted. And the finest thing in the world to plant that seed is to take on this piece of paper now and just write across that, thank you. That's the law of acceptance. And you would be amazed how many people in this world can't accept their good. You would be shocked. Thank you means that I have accepted it. I'm going to have it. I know it's mine. When we plant that seed in the subconscious mind, the thing starts working towards you. The reason this thing keeps coming back to you, this is the only way that the universal law has of talking to you. There's no voice. That's all in visualization. And when this dream comes up, what it really means is it is on its way to you. It is on its way to you. It's right around the corner. And so you do not, at that time, say how, when, or where. All you do is say, thank you. Because you know it's on its way. You can have anything in this world you want to have, and you can be anything in this world you want to be by using this simple process. Children, our children, folks, how many times have you heard people say to their children, the child says, I'm going to be president of the United States. And the father and mother would say to him, you, with your studies, you'll never make it, Junior. Now, this is a wonderful seed to plant in this fertile little brain, the subconscious, this fertile little mind. You are telling him he can't. He isn't smart enough. The child says, I'm going to be a rich man when I grow up. I'm going to have everything in this world. He says, you're going to have to learn a lot, Junior. One thing, you don't know how to handle money. Now, anytime any children come to you or to the parents, you should tell your children this. They say, Junior, You're the type of child that can have anything in this world. You have the ability and the intelligence to go anywhere, do anything, and have everything in this world. It is yours because you're that type of a child. Start planting these seeds in our children. This country today is teaching too many children, what to think instead of how to think. And what are we? We are only children a little older than the other children. And we are growing up children. And we have to, at some time in life, we have to start deciding and pinpointing things that we want in this world. And I am not just talking about the tangible objects. I'm talking about the intangible things. What would you like to be? What type of person would you like to be? Would you like to have more love in your life? Well, then you must learn to give love. You'll never have anything without giving. Everything I give, I receive back, multiplied. If I have a lot of hate in my life, I'm giving hate out. And so if I don't want hate coming in my life, I should not be giving it out. If I don't want people to talk about me, I shouldn't be talking about people. Everything that I send out, I get back with feeling. Every thought I think, I don't get because I did not plant my seed properly. I did not have a true visualization. And I'm saying this, that you analyze this yourself and ask yourself this basic question. Do you know what you want in life? If I was to ask you right now, what do you really want? What are the tangible objects that you want in this world? The things that you can feel and touch and smell. What are these things that you want in life? And you know, folks, the amazing thing, I doubt if there's 2% of the people in this room could tell me and describe it and just like that come right out and say it. You don't know exactly what you want. And this is why, folks, that you know what happens? We get a lot of things that's left over from the people who know what they want. That's why we do not get the things. We haven't defined it. We do not know exactly what we want. So what is it that you want? Define it. Write it down. Pinpoint every drop of that dream that you have in your mind. Define it so clearly on that piece of paper that you can completely see it in your mind. Expect wonderful things. Be a creator of ideas. Let's not be moons, the reflector of ideas. Let's be suns. Let's be the creator of the light. Let's be the creator of the ideas. Because we all have the capacity. You know, that the guardian of the gate is the conscious mind. This guardian can at any time let any thought through to the subconscious mind at once. Any thought at any time. We are thinking human beings. We have the capacity to think of anything in this world we can think of. But we do not have the capacity to think of nothing. Now you try to imagine what nothing is. Try to get a thought of that. There is absolutely no way. So that means that we are thinking human beings and there's thoughts flying through our mind continuously. A steady flow of thoughts all the time coming through the mind. Now where do these thoughts come from? All of a sudden you say, gee, that just must have come out of the clear blue sky. Must have come out of clear blue to me. You didn't think of it. In fact, it might be something you didn't even know about. And the thought comes through and you say, well, that's kind of ridiculous, isn't it? That couldn't happen to me. And so you throw that thought aside. And if it's a good thought, why not accept it and stop it and analyze it and accept it and let it happen to you? And these thoughts are coming through our mind all the time. But a negative thought comes through and it stops there for a minute and say, boy, that's a good negative thought. I'll have to stop and analyze that one. And you start thinking about it and pretty soon you get a frown on your face and you think about it a little more and you create a beautiful picture and all of a sudden you put that down in the subconscious and you say, boy, there's another bad thing's going to happen to me. Have you ever caught yourself thinking about something you didn't want to think about and you've been thinking about it for 5 minutes? And all of a sudden you say, what am I thinking about that nasty thing for? We do it all the time, folks. But we can stop now anytime we want. And we can change that thought and put in a good thought. If you don't want to think about hate, think about love. If you don't want to think about anything that is negative, put a positive idea in your head. And you know what happens? And you can analyze it and you can just dream about it and everything else and get all these seeds planted properly and have all these wonderful things happen. Get 20 wonderful seeds planted. Get them written down, defined. Thank you.